Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope wherever you are in the world, you're having a good day. And welcome to another Chain Fusion Live. I've got a phenomenal guest. I'm really excited for this one. We have Francesca Conti from Outlier Ventures here to talk. Francesca, how are you doing?
Hey Kyle, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to discussing all things Web3, Bitcoin, AI, and so forth.
There's a lot of big topics there, Bitcoin and AI, and I love it. So I've been looking forward to all weekend to have this conversation with you.
Myself as well. Myself as well. Thanks for having me again.
So Outlier Ventures has been popping up. I see you guys everywhere on X. I see you at events. You guys are like, you're in on the inside within Web3. Like you said, Bitcoin and AI are two opposite ends of the spectrum, but yet you guys are able to put your feet in both of them. For the viewers who may not have heard of Outlier Ventures, do you mind giving a background on what Outlier Ventures is and how you guys got started and everything?
Yeah, absolutely. So at Outlier Ventures, we are the world's largest Web3 accelerator. So essentially, we are also the largest Web3 investor by volume. So as it stands, we've been around for about 10 years now, operating the accelerator model for about the better half of five. And we have over 300 portfolio companies that, although that seems like a lot, generally our acceptance rate is less than 2%. So it's really the creme de la creme of what is to offer in Web3. And as you mentioned, Kyle, we recruit builders that are harnessing burgeoning technologies such as AI, Bitcoin, gaming, DeFi, infrastructure. So a lot of those topics that we'll get into later to date. But when you think of what a Web3 builder typifies, something that's very important for us is to have a global aspect. And that's something that very much comes from the ethos of the organization as well. We have individuals that work at Outlier Ventures from all corners of the world. Originally, I'm from the US, but now I'm living in London. I was living in Paris. So it's very much an atmosphere in which people are nomadic in a sense, that we're really fully connected to what's next and in areas that are well representing and emerging markets as well.
That's probably one of the best aspects of our industry that I like personally. It's just the global nature and how it's this even playing field across the globe that anyone can participate, and the different perspectives that you get by just opening up outside that. So you said 2% acceptance rate. So obviously you set a high bar, but yet you guys have been around for 10 years. So I can see how Outlier Ventures would be essentially a leader in that you can have a high expectation for your founders, and then but then also have the broad reach within the industry just through your long experience.
Certainly, I'd say something that's formidable for us is we have a world-class team in place with subject matter experts. So individuals that can help builders with their tokenomics, their marketing, fundraising, tech and product support. So a lot of different areas in which certain founders are maybe struggling to find that premium uplift. And that's what we provide at Outlier Ventures alongside the programming team, which myself, I'm an accelerator lead. So essentially leading the cohort of the program, helping founders make those connections with internal individuals at Outlier Ventures, but also with external experts like the works of Dfinity. You've been a great partner of ours. I know that ICP is collaborating with builders in the AI program that's currently taking place. So making sure we're up to date in building those relationships with world-class talent and connecting them with our portfolio companies.
I love it. And I know Dfinity's loved working with OV as well. Walk me through, everyone who gets into Web3 has an interesting story on how they got into Web3. Do you mind, if you feel comfortable, do you mind kind of walking through your journey into Web3?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So my journey into Web3, as we were discussing, Kyle, a little bit, is one that is a bit of an anomaly in many senses, but it's a great gathering of like-minded voices and people that are just really interested in new technology and what that entails. So my background is I had started in media and journalism for the better part of a decade. So had a really close pulse on what was taking place, especially in financial news. And I saw Bitcoin specifically come about when I was working in 2013. And at that time, I was honestly really a skeptic. I thought, how could this take place? I didn't know people in my circle that would be building or interested in this technology. So naturally, I adopted an attitude in which I was more skeptical of that. However, I had worked with a few principals or institutions that were working on blockchain projects, one of that being IBM. And it showed a way to navigate food safety through blockchain. And I thought that was a fascinating example and one of a real use case that could be have real world complications, but also real world benefits as well. So
Yeah.
naturally, I dived down this deep hole. I was listening to podcasts and an array of crazy stories, something I've talked about on another podcast recently is I really enjoyed The Missing Crypto Queen, which was a BBC podcast that it was about OneCoin. So a really dodgy figure in history. But with this and with my skepticism, I continued to dive deeper. And especially within the last year and a half of being at Outlier Ventures, I'm very much a proponent on burgeoning technology and where that adaptation lies. And especially for use cases that go way beyond what we've seen in 2013, 2014, and bringing it much more to everyday use cases now.
Awesome. That's such a fun journey. And it kind of just highlights how quickly our industry has evolved in just the last few years, right? You mentioned like OneCoin. That feels like that was a lifetime ago. And
It
yet,
was, but it made such a mark on me. It really did. So, I mean, it's interesting, Kyle, as you say, that you can take these takeaways or these stories, and we've seen kind of a thread change within the last 10 years, and also that of being the narrative, right? So I think very much from 2013 or 2014, from where I was seated, and especially being in the US, where you still don't see that adoption happening as quickly as other parts of the world,
Mhm.
it was one that was met with maybe a touch of cynicism, but especially in the last 10 years, and you've really seen a lot of interesting use cases and what's come about. I mean, even within the Outlier Ventures portfolio, we have Fetch AI, which is building an open platform for AI ramifications and services. So certainly this is something that we've had on our pulse for a while, and what can be there. So exciting times.
Very excited. You kind of, and we touched on this before we hit record. We talked a little bit about just like the US being behind in crypto. And then, I mean, just recent news in terms of like the Franklin Templeton news, as well as like the political race within the US. I'd be interested in your thoughts of just like how the US has evolved since those times where, US almost was a skeptic of crypto.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, anecdotally, I moved to Europe at the end of 2021. And even since my time being away, I've seen the sentiment and narrative around cryptocurrency change tenfold within the US. And I can speak to my group of individuals, so my close friends, my family. When I first started to work at Outlier Ventures, people thought I worked for Bitcoin. So that was always a fun topic to explain. No, I don't work for Bitcoin. But I feel very much now you're seeing a renewed sentiment of people really engaged and wanting to better understand the technology, especially with the scalability and composability layers being built on Bitcoin, and also mass adoption and things of that respect. Kyle, you touched upon the upcoming elections as well. I mean, we're seeing more and more things pop up in terms of people having their eyes on what politicians are saying about it, regulation. You also mentioned Franklin Templeton CEO noting that very recently in an interview with CNBC that we're only seeing the first wave of adoptions with big institutions. So let's stand by our seats because we're going to see the big guys come in. But we've already seen some of the big guys come in, right? With the spot ETFs and BlackRock and Fidelity as well. So we're already seeing like big players that are taking a stance towards Web3 and crypto adoption. And that's certainly not going to change. And we're seeing that what will be really interesting, though, is the regulatory aspect and what that evolves or looks like in the coming months with the election ahead. Something we were discussing as well are our candidates. RFK was a year ago as like a very controversial voice talking about Bitcoin donations. And now it seems kind of like, okay, that's the obvious where everyone's going to have a stance on that. So it's no longer a topic that's very much on the fringe, but now has become into the forefold as really like real world conversations. And I think you're going to very much see that's not going to change, that will remain.
Yeah, it is. It is remarkable that each political party now has to have a platform. Like they can't. It's not just we can ignore this thing. Every political party now has a platform on crypto. I loved how you said of it used to be like, oh, I work for Bitcoin, or like that's what the family thinks. My parents would probably, when they probably talk with their friends, they say, Kyle does Bitcoin. Is kind of what they said. So when I try to describe a whole new way of like a internet tech stack, they're like, I don't get that. And like, what is it? Bitcoin? Said, yeah, it's Bitcoin. Let's just settle it's Bitcoin.
You bring up a great point, and something that, very much goes to what I try to bestow upon the founders I work with is it's very important that we as an industry don't get so fixated on the jargon we use because when we talk about, mass adoption, you always hear about mass adoption and getting people more involved in the space. Well, very much from my own experience, and I'd be curious to hear from you, Kyle, as well, is people that are interested in this space, might be there, but they're a little scared or put off by some of the technology or the more technical terms that this industry likes to put forward. But very much as you're seeing new waves of technology and interesting companies come along that have a phrase that's very easy to understand, then it makes more sense. A great example of this is I worked with a company called Sati in the Bitcoin cohort that their messaging was sending Bitcoin via WhatsApp. Everyone knows what WhatsApp is. Everyone knows about sending money. So in their mind, okay, that's something I can wrap my head around. That's something that is not so foreign to me, that we're not talking about liquidity pools or, something that really could take a long time to understand. So it's putting it in a way that's much more digestible and easier for people to get involved, which I think is fascinating and I'm really a proponent of.
I'm really encouraged to hear that because I do feel like one of our problems within our industry is the fact that we focus on the technology stack and not the product, right? Almost like we've kind of lost, or maybe not lost, but it's just we haven't evolved or matured yet to the point where we realize like the product is actually what's important, and it's just the technology stack enables a different product that wasn't possible 5 or 10 years ago. And I was like, I can think back. I've got enough gray hair to remember when AOL was coming out, and that was like the first time that people were, at least in America, were connecting onto the internet. I was, I don't know, I was maybe 15 or 16 at the time, and I just remember being like, look, you can get the news on the internet, and it would just be a copy paste of whatever whatever some newspaper ran in their paper. They would just copy paste it online. And I remember talking with friends and family members and them saying like, well, what's the point? I get the paper. Like, why would I need to go onto my computer to read it? I'd rather read it in the paper. And that's kind of, I think, the stance that we're at within crypto of like, let's take what was existing and let's kind of move it into a blockchain version of it. The next evolution is then realizing like, actually, if you can do it online, like in the newspaper example, if you can do it online, then the news cycle condenses, right? And you can, there's different products that are possible that you can't do with a paper newspaper. And so I think we're starting to see products that like are evolving of saying like, well, actually the blockchain's not the point. It's that this product can change than what we had before. Now I've gone down a really long tangent. So
No, I love the way you put that in. Again, making it so people want to get involved and feel like it's an easy conduit to do so. It's not making it overly complicated so people feel abashed or afraid to ask questions. I mean, I can even speak from my own personal experience for listeners that have an interest in what's going on, but maybe don't understand all the technical terms. That when I had joined Outlier Ventures, I always had a voracious appetite to learn new technology, but I certainly wouldn't have considered myself a degen when I started. But that's okay. And I think that's what's really interesting about this space too, Kyle, is because, very much in Web3, you see people from all walks of life coming together in a way that is really interesting. So when we talk about gravitas or standing or years of experience, I find in my personal day-to-day, that doesn't matter as much. That maybe other industries like to take a foothold and say, yes, I have 20 years in XYZ industry. No, I think that very much something that's fresh, and I can speak to my own experience. Recently, I had spoken at an event at Paris Blockchain Week at the Sandbox, and some of the most reputable individuals at the event were much younger than me, or I did not have the professional experience as those of my counterparts, but they were just interesting people who really took hold of Web3 and sunk their teeth into it. And I find that those are the individuals that are being rewarded.
That's so true. Well said. Well, let's dive in. I would love to hear like OV's kind of like what you guys are looking for in 2024, 2025, right? Things are evolving quickly. Like where are you guys at on the next year and a half or so?
Yeah, so we're very bullish on what's to come. I mean, something that we've touched upon is AI. We've always been particularly interested in that space with our investments such as Fetch AI, Associate AI, who I actually had worked with the founder. She's building a technology that essentially is the Web3 version of Like to Know It. Maybe you're familiar with the platform, maybe you're not, but essentially an AI tool that really uses deep tech to better understand its consumers and suggest buying based on those habits. So we're seeing that manifest in many different senses, from deep tech to more social fi or applications. Certainly Bitcoin is a theme that's not going away. We're very much continuing to look for individuals that are building in the space. A topic of interest for us very much is asset issuance. So when we talked about ordinals or ruins, fungible, non-fungible, what that looks like, I find that that's something we're going to continue driving the charge on, if you will. Infrastructure, bread and butter, that's something that very much we're looking to continue to work upon, especially DeFi offerings as well. We have a real world assets program that's also taking place in conjunction with AI, which I know we've spoken about before. So these are themes that very much are not going away in the next year, and that also being metaverse and gaming. So you could say we have our hands in many pots, so to speak, but with the expertise and the knowledge we have, we can certainly bring our skill sets to help the founders that are participating in our cohort programs and give them that premium uplift to get the next leg up in their journey.
Yeah, that's nice. It's incredible, the breadth of what you guys are involved in. But I mean, I'm starting to see, maybe you agree or disagree, a lot of those, I don't know if you call them verticals maybe, but they're starting to almost bleed into each other in very unique ways. Like you see GameFi with some DeFi aspects, SocialFi and DeFi. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing or.
Completely. You put it very well, Kyle, because something I also believe through our research team and from just looking at the breadth of applications available within Bitcoin is this is something that I find is not going to be a vertical that's a standalone for very long. I mean, you're going to see Bitcoin bleed into every other sphere. So it's just naturally going to be a part of what people are building. You bring up a great point, DeFi and gamification as well. So we're seeing a lot of these verticals blend into one another. And that's something that comes from innovation, fresh perspectives, partnerships as well, and just a renewed sense of Web3 building.
Love it. Let's dive deep into the Bitcoin thesis. It's something I've enjoyed watching as like building on Bitcoin has become a thing in the last year. How does the OVC, like what is your guys' Bitcoin thesis?
Yeah, so our Bitcoin thesis is, again, we're very much proponents of this space. We were early looking for applicants, trying to find unique individuals to invest in. I'd say this took place at end of September, early October. So before the wild ride of Bitcoin began, I'd say December, January. So we've had our eye on the pulse for quite some time now. And in terms of the areas that we're specifically keen in doubling down on are DeFi, infrastructure, asset issuance. So what we mentioned a bit, like ordinals, ruins, components, bringing that new technology onto Bitcoin, and then also energy and mining. So energy and mining is a really interesting one. And I believe ICP is working with Loca Mining, who was one of our portfolio companies as well. And this was particularly timely due to having taking place in April. So you could say very much all eyes on Bitcoin. And that's what we've been seeing. And anecdotally, I can say that's not really going to change anytime soon. When I speak to other investors in the space or builders, everywhere I've been going or every conversation I've been having has some element of Bitcoin and discussions, whether it's philosophical ones about shitcoins, and talking about the longevity and what place do they have, if any, within the ecosystem, or very much from OGs that have been in the Bitcoin space for quite some time. I mean, one of the external mentors that we brought into the program was Charlie Shrem, which we know is a heavyweight in the space, along with Jameson Lopp. So that was great to have Definity's point of view in our external mentor network alongside those voices, and really see a collaboration of newer voices and those that are OG Bitcoiners, and what that looks like. So exciting times ahead for sure.
With when you mentioned meme coins, it made me just think about your comment earlier about how this is an industry where maybe your previous experience or your previous viewpoints don't matter as much as what you do now. And meme coins is like a great example of that, where in 2021 meme coins became really jumped onto the scene, and everyone who wasn't minting millions by buying meme coins was like, well, that's stupid. That's not what our industry is. This is a dumb thing. And the fact that it stuck around almost basically says, well, no, this is not stupid anymore. It's still here. It's still a thing. I don't know. It's very interesting how something like a meme coin or a shit coin has kind of kept within our industry as a thing. So
for sure. And something that is not unique is I read a piece recently about the taxonomy of meme coins and what that looks like, and if there's a hierarchy, if you will, and what holds value and truth to the industry. And I did a great job of breaking it down and saying that, no, this really has a place to remain and a place to stay. And that was the sentiment I heard from a lot of builders when speaking to them, that when I mentioned the philosophical discussion between the place of meme coins and what that looks like, I was surprised to see that a lot of voices said, no, this has real real ammo, and this is really something that we should be looking towards and celebrating and getting more people involved, and this is just a mechanism to do so. So I thought that was a really interesting point, because I don't think those are going away either.
It if nothing else, it proves out marketing, right? There's only a handful of brands that have been able to market themselves to be worth, let's say, $1 billion or something like that. And yet within our space, it seems to happen on a weekly basis. And so there's definitely something there about Web3 has tapped into a marketing channel that a product can go from zero to $1 billion brand name in a matter of days or weeks. And so,
Absolutely. And that's something that I firmly believe, do not underestimate the marketing power behind Web3, because since this is a space that is so community driven, and very much we see from Arbitrum and things of the like, that people really have a commitment to the community and expect a lot from that. So marketing, tooling, that's not going anywhere, and the longevity and livelihood of that. So very much having that play as a component and keeping that salient and relevant is something that, we see from Warpcast or Discord, engaging with the community, getting people involved, and having a place and having a say is so important.
Love it. Let's dive deeper into Ordinals and Runes. You came back around to them multiple times. So why is Outlier Ventures interested in both of those? And what is kind of the investing thesis around Ordinals and Runes?
Yeah, Ordinals and Runes, I'd say those are the new kids on the block, right? So that's something that people have been talking about in the last year or so. And when we talk about scalability and composability playing into the Bitcoin ecosystem, so Runes, think of fungible tokens, so loyalty points, things that people can very much grasp their head around, and is more of a non-fixed unit. So when we think about ordinals, they're more a fixed unit and something more along the lines of, for listeners that are not really into ordinals or have elementary education, sort of like an NFT for the platform. So we're seeing those come up again and again because people are using that as new technology that's really bringing a freshness to the space. And that very much goes back to Franklin Templeton. I mean, first their CEO came out saying like Ordinals, the thing that is driving Bitcoin. And now they're talking about Bitcoin ETFs and big people and big players getting in. So we're seeing a lot of those bigger institutions wanting to get a bite of the apple, so to speak, because they see that as a real way to get in and untap talent in the space. So something that we're very much continuing to look towards, and we had an exciting project we worked with called Ordinals that is doing just that, and the team has really been flourishing in the last few months.
Do you anticipate it's almost like a copy paste of what NFTs were on like Ethereum or Solana, or do Ordinals, from your perspective, have like attributes or a narrative that is kind of fresh to the space?
I do think that there's a little bit of a difference, because in just my own experience speaking and working with builders in Bitcoin, it's a little bit of a different philosophy there, that a lot of them have been, these founders are not, new to the game. So they've been successful entrepreneurs before. They've been in this space for a long time. They're not newbies by any means. So the way that they approach certain topics or aspects, I find are a little bit different than like Ethereum or Solana. But again, there's a place for everyone. So I think we're very much going to see that come forward. So sort of the old guard and the new guard coming together.
Yeah. I mean, then that's exactly what you would hope for in a growing space, right? Is a marketplace where it chooses winners and losers, and also new entrants have an opportunity to compete as well.
For sure. I keep telling my mom that she needs to get MetaMask, and she doesn't quite understand, but we're going to get there by the end of 2024.
What is the key? What is the key to getting your mom on MetaMask, or to hold coins in some wallet somehow?
I feel it very much goes back to the conversation of just making technology and concepts digestible and easy to understand, and demystifying that a bit. And I very much believe, even within our portfolio company, like how we encourage founders to position themselves is in a way that you want to make the UX so accessible anyone can do it. So especially for the friends I have, or I used my mom as an example, but I can account for many people of all different age and demographics. It's really getting people to not be afraid of the technology, making it really accessible and easy for them to understand. And also for when we talk about people holding on to the idea of really complex jargon, to let go of that ego. Let's take that away. Let's make it like I've seen time and time again on LinkedIn a glossary of terms of demystifying Web3 jargon, and I think it's great, because very much it allows people to get further involved in the space that, in some ways, Kyle, and what we discussed, it's this attitude that in Web3, we're kind of coming from all different places with a uniqueness, but we're also in a place that we want to grow and be part of this community. But in terms of accepting or allowing other people into that, it's going to have to come to a space that, collectively as a community, okay, let's make this so it's very easy for people to understand. As you had put it well previously, let's make sure that technology is really in the background. So we're not presenting that as the unique selling point, but we're getting across something that people want to be involved in. And this is just the technology to make that happen.
Yeah. So that's such a good answer. What, in terms of like diving deeper into Bitcoin, I'm fascinated with this idea. Actually, maybe if I back up, like when I first got into Bitcoin, like in 2018, there was this idea that was talked about where it was like basically like Ethereum. What happens on Ethereum, it'll kind of like be a battleground or a testing ground, and it'll end up, if it succeeds, it'll move over to Bitcoin at some point. That was a very common thing, and then I think that language kind of dropped off out of favor, and more like the Bitcoin as a store of value or a replacement for gold kind of became the more narrative. But yet now we see both of those narratives kind of coinciding, right? Where you have the store of value, I think, has been established. Wall Street has now given its blessing on it. But yet this idea of, well, actually, things that were happening on Ethereum or Solana or any other L1 are now starting to like find a place within Bitcoin. Are those two like narratives simpatico with each other? Can they kind of coexist, or is there one narrative that's probably more important? Or I don't know, how do you guys see that?
Yeah, so many thoughts around this that are just floating through my head. And although they do seem as though they're a dichotomy, very much to your point, they do dually exist in an interesting way. So I find that probably both of those narratives hold true, and we're going to have to just wait and see what unfolds. But Kyle, you bring up a good point because something I was reading today from the block found that the spot ETFs within the US have, I believe, 4% of the total holdings for Bitcoin at the moment, which, I mean, that's a crazy large number for a short amount of time. So we're definitely seeing more of those institutional players and that pattern of holding on to Bitcoin and store as a storage or a value, so to speak. But then also the narrative of like what exists on Solana and Ethereum converging with Bitcoin. And we see that even within our portfolio companies too. So one of the projects I had worked with, Bloom, which is a Web3 wallet, very much is curious to explore different areas, but they see Bitcoin as a real avenue for growth and opportunity. And these are two strong, really strong builders. So in my experience, you're certainly seeing founders exploring both opportunities as dual avenues and a way of exploration and growth, which I think in my experience has been working quite well.
That's so awesome. And I think that that's a perfect answer. And it comes around to like, we'll let the market decide. Like the market is already deciding that store value, like the ETFs becoming, you said 4% of all Bitcoin is held by ETFs. Like that's just such a phenomenal number that if you went back a year ago, you would never have guessed that. So
no, I mean, and that's what's so interesting and wonderful about the space we work in, because really nothing is impossible. I mean, things move at a clip, and it's really important that if you are interested in being in this space, or you are in this space in general, to really just be abreast of the ongoings and comings, because I can tell you, even preparing for this podcast, things had changed 4 days out. So just always being on top of what's going on, who's building what, who's getting involved. It's such an interesting place to be at the moment. And there really is, there is an avenue for everyone, both institutionally, consumer facing, builder facing. There's something for everyone to get involved in.
Yeah, especially like being an accelerator, Outlier Ventures is always going to be on the bleeding edge, right? So all of what you're saying of things change very quickly is even more amplified in your position. Does it get exhausting at all?
No, I find it really thrilling. I can happily say that I love doing what I do and being so close to these founders. And it's a great avenue in terms of almost working with these startups, but having an investment lens as well. And I think that's something that's great about accelerators as well, but particularly wonderful about Outlier Ventures is since we have the expertise and the gravitas in the space, but very much keep abreast on the new technology of evolving. We're able to keep up to date with what's taking place and be really close to the founders we work with. The team is about 60 individuals, so we're a strong and mighty team, but at the same point, we have individuals that are experts in those different fields, such as tokenomics, fundraising, marketing, product, and tech. So it provides a real expertise or real support to the founders we work with. And so it's very 360 in nature, but also diving into more of the specifics based on what you're hoping to achieve within the program. So, and what I find really particularly exciting is even though we've helped foster companies that are now valued at several $1 billion, most of the companies I've historically worked with are at that sweet stage between pre-seed and seed, that they've raised some money, they have a great team in place, but are really looking for extra support and just kind of filling in the gaps to get them to the next level. And that's where we find ourselves at Outlier Ventures, helping fill in those gaps and providing that overview or that insight to help those founders take the next step in their journey in an accessible and meaningful way. And then also just the larger array of portfolio companies within that, I'd say a really meaningful aspect as well is for founders to just be building with other founders in our portfolio and finding like-minded synergies there, because Web3 is very much, even though it's a growing space, as you know, Kyle, it's a very small space as well. So making sure you make those connections and ensuring that people are well situated. There's so many people who I've talked with on Telegram for months at a time that maybe I've met at a conference once, but
Mhm.
it's all within the same aspect of getting together and people being excited about what's in store.
I love how you touched on filling in the gaps, because I have to imagine. I mean, I've talked with enough founders, at least in the ICP area, as well as just you just meet and greet people who've
Sure.
started business. And they always say the hardest thing is that you're a founder. Maybe you have a partner or two partners, and yet you're running an entire business. So whether it's go to market, or it's product, or it's the tech stack, or it's research and development, like you have to do it all. And so I imagine your founders love just having like another resource in Outlier Ventures that they can go back to and say, look, I'm not very good on the legal side, can you help me understand this, or can you point me in the right direction?
For sure. And that's something very much we wholeheartedly believe and want to help our founders because, especially for a team that, as you mentioned, Kyle, maybe has one or two co founders. Some we work with teams that are excess of 5 plus, but often they don't have all the necessary resources to get them to the next stage. So that's where we jump in and say, okay, these are the tools that we would suggest, or these are the resources we're able to give. And something that has been really beneficial, and I know Divinity has been part of, is that external mentor network. So not only bringing in the internal resources to help these founders, but also making sure they're connecting with the foremost thought leaders within that industry. So within Bitcoin, making sure that the teams that are looking for those Web3 marketing agencies are speaking with the most up-to-date relevant agencies possible, or those that are looking for BD and sales support, connecting them to that, or market makers, exchanges. So very much the power in terms of the internal resources, but also our external network as well.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm assuming there's lots of founders who are going to watch this either live or they'll watch the replay. Where should they go to get more information if they're really loving what they're hearing?
Yeah, so I would encourage all builders that are working in terms of the Bitcoin space, AI, real world assets, so on and so forth, to check out our website, which is outlierventures.io/base camp call for builder. So I'm sure that will be available on a banner somewhere. People can check out. Thank you for that. Just wanted to make sure I got that across well. So essentially, this is a call for builders. So if you find yourself listening to this podcast saying, okay, this is me, I'd like to learn more about Outlier Ventures, would this be a good fit for what I'm building? Feel free to check that out and for more information. And then always, looking at that, we have a multi-step process, in which we validate individuals that would be a good like-minded fit. So very much, you hear the term founder first, but in an accelerator model such as ours, we have really the ethos of founders come first, and we want to help people, fill out their full potential, so to speak.
That's awesome. And you mentioned a few times. I'll ask you to do it again. So the categories are Bitcoin, AI, real world assets.
Bitcoin, AI, real world assets, DeFi, infrastructure, deepen. So those are just a plethora of ones to check out. We also have gaming and metaverse. So there's something for everyone in Outlier Ventures.
Okay.
So if you're interested in learning more, definitely encourage you to check out the website to hear a little and see a little bit more about what we're looking for, and if you would be a potential good fit. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Is there a way for there's going to be people who use these type of apps that are watching this? Is there a way for them to find out all the projects that have maybe gone live or that are in the pipeline, so they can keep up to date on like what the new projects are coming into the Web3 space?
Definitely. So Outlier Ventures is extremely active on X/Twitter. I'll always call it Twitter. So you can look forward to announcements there in terms of who comprises of the cohort. We're also very involved in LinkedIn, getting further involved in Workcast and Discord and things of the like. So you can check us out on those platforms. But on our website, it should have a full list of what comprises of our portfolio companies. So again, some of the ones that are more notable are Boson Protocol, which you've probably heard of, by Economy. So certainly really formidable voices in the community that have come from Outlier Ventures, but also some really new, fresh faces like Open Trade that recently closed around with A16Z and is in the real world asset space. So again, something for everyone, and I would encourage you to look further there.
I love that. All right, as we wrap up, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask.
Okay, great.
Let's fast forward a year from now. What is something that occurred in our industry that we didn't expect today? So outside of what we're expecting how our industry to go, 2025, what do you think is going to be the main story that we missed?
Well, that's a great question. Main story we missed. Something that maybe I'll turn it on its head is a little bit is I'm very curious to see how regulation is going to play out within the next year, because that's going to really change where people are building to. I can speak for the US founders that I work with. They're waiting on the edge of their seat, literally, to see what transpires and whether their businesses should stay within the US or what that looks like. And something that we had not touched upon too much, but I'm very much looking forward to and seeing what further evolves in that is just gaming is such a huge space. And gaming is something that we very much have invested historically in the past. And I find that we're only going to see that bleed into more of Bitcoin in that aspect, and like gamification, DeFi integration within gaming. So something to look forward to.
Definitely a blending between playing a game and also kind of like managing financial transactions. They're definitely, I mean,
exactly.
You know, the stock market is a game in and of itself. So
yes, it is.
Anyone who has the Robinhood app should not be surprised that DeFi and GameFi can go together really well.
That's a great point you bring up, and that's something that was something that was very hot in the last few days. That Robinhood acquiring Bitstamp, which honestly, like, good for them. I mean, it made sense that they were able to take advantage of Bitstamp's legacy in the space and their licensing. So I think that was a really smart play by Robinhood.
Yeah. And do you think we'll continue to see partnerships like that between what might be like traditional Fi and now Web3 companies? Is that going to be a narrative?
Definitely. I find that we're going to see a lot more of that, because just even within M&A, I mean, we're going to see other more institutional firms just not wanting to go through the headache of having to set things up. Maybe they don't have the resources or the manpower, so to speak, to build and spin off their own things. So I personally believe we're going to see a lot more of the acquisition of like these bigger players buying the likes of Bitstamp to better accompany their offerings. And that, again, is only going to drive forward further adoption, right? Because listeners might not be familiar with Bitstamp. A lot of people know who Robinhood is. So we're going to see that happen more and more.
Yeah, it definitely seems, I mean, what we touched on it multiple times about Web3 being a space that, is unique in, like, it's in the sense of the way it markets itself, the way it builds community. It definitely seems, if you're not used to this space, it's a lot easier to just kind of pay your way into the space than it is to build from scratch, because it's
nothing wrong with that too. Nothing wrong with that.
Well, Francesca Conti, I really do appreciate your time. Where, if you feel okay, do you mind if I ask where people can follow you on X or keep up to date?
Yeah, exactly. So actually, I piggyback on Outlier Ventures Twitter, so you can check us out there. But you can find me on more traditional forums like LinkedIn, and also I'll include my Telegram here as a call to action for founders that want to message me. That's FJCONTI. So if you're interested in what you heard today and you'd like to explore more, you had a chance to read our thesis online, or you've seen the call for builders and would like to get a better understanding of what that entails, feel free to send me a note on Telegram. Again, that's FJ Conti. And I'd be happy to take your questions.
Francesca, this was such a fun conversation. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Kyle. It was wonderful to be on, and such a pleasure. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much. You too. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to appreciate your time and Chain Fusion Live, and we will see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks.